This is the third story of our series, Who Was He? Today, we take you back over 2,300 years to a man whose words shaped kings, whose thoughts guided civilizations, and whose mysteries still haunt history. A man born in a small Greek town who went on to become the father of biology, the teacher of Alexander the Great, and the philosopher whose ideas never died, even when his books burned to ashes. Who was he? What secrets did he leave behind? And why does his name still echo across the centuries like a shadow that refuses to fade? Stay with us, because the story of Aristotle is not just history. It is a journey into the mind of one of the greatest thinkers the world has ever known. In the quiet seaside town of Stagira in 384 BC, a child was born who would one day change the destiny of human thought, Aristotle. But his story didn't begin with comfort. It began with loss. His father, Nicomachus, was the royal physician to the king of Macedon, and from him, young Aristotle inherited an obsession with nature, medicine, and the secrets of life itself. Yet, tragedy struck early. His parents died when he was still a boy, leaving him under the guardianship of his relative Proxenus. This loss shaped him in mysterious ways. While other children played, Aristotle asked questions no one could answer. Why do stars move? Why does a fish breathe differently from a bird? He would spend hours wandering the rocky hills and the Aegean shores, collecting plants, insects, and shells, trying to read the hidden book of nature. Locals often mocked him as the strange boy of Stagira, but he didn't care. One story says that even as a child, he dissected small animals, carefully observing their organs. He believed that every creature carried a secret blueprint of the universe within its body. Imagine a boy of 10, staring at the night sky, whispering to himself, "The world has an order. I will find it." This restless hunger, born from loss and solitude, became the spark that pushed Aristotle toward Athens, knowledge, and eventually, immortality in history. At the age of 17, Aristotle left his small hometown of Stagira and walked into the beating heart of Greece, Athens, a city alive with debates, theatre, and philosophy. But for Aristotle, the true magnet was Plato's Academy, the most famous school in the world. Imagine a place where the greatest minds of Greece gathered daily under olive trees, arguing about the soul, justice, and the universe. When Aristotle entered, whispers began, "Here comes the golden mind from Stagira." And indeed, he quickly stood out. While other students memorized Plato's teachings, Aristotle questioned them. Plato taught that the real world was only a shadow of perfect forms existing elsewhere. But young Aristotle would ask, if truth is somewhere else, then why do we live here? Why study nature if it's only a shadow? His sharpness was so intense that Plato is said to have called him the mind of the school. Yet there was tension. Aristotle admired Plato, but refused to blindly accept his ideas. This clash created mystery. Was Aristotle the heir of Plato's wisdom, or the challenger who would shatter it? When Plato died, everyone expected Aristotle to lead the academy. But fate twisted. Leadership went to another, and Aristotle quietly left, carrying with him both Plato's inspiration and his own burning rebellion. In Athens, under Plato's shadow, the seeds of a revolution in philosophy were planted, seeds that would grow into Aristotle's own unique empire of knowledge. Fate often plays strange games. Aristotle, the wandering philosopher, suddenly found himself called to the royal court of Macedonia. The request? To tutor a boy who would one day shake the entire world. Alexander, son of King Philip II. When Aristotle first met the young prince, Alexander was just 13, restless, curious, and already carrying the pride of a conqueror. Most saw him as an impatient child, but Aristotle saw something else, a burning fire that needed direction. He took Alexander away from the noise of the palace into quiet gardens, where lessons were not just words, but adventures. Aristotle didn't teach with books alone. He opened the boy's eyes to mysteries of nature, poetry, philosophy, and science. He showed him how ants carried burdens greater than themselves, how stars followed eternal paths, how politics shaped nations. Alexander would later say, "My father gave me life, but Aristotle taught me how to live." But here lies the suspense. Did Aristotle unknowingly shape a mind that would become both a genius and a destroyer? Alexander grew to admire Homer's Iliad, which Aristotle personally annotated for him, and carried it as his sword of wisdom in every battle. Under this teaching, Alexander began to dream, not just of kingdoms, but of destiny. When Alexander marched to conquer the world, many whispered, "Behind the sword of the king, there was always the mind of the philosopher." After years of wandering, teaching, and even living under the shadow of kings, Aristotle returned to Athens. But this time, he wasn't a student. He was ready to build his own empire of knowledge. In 335 BC, he founded a school that would become legendary, the Lyceum. Unlike Plato's Academy, which often floated in abstract ideas, the Lyceum was alive with movement, observation, and discovery. Students there were called peripatetics, the walkers, because Aristotle loved to teach while walking in the shaded colonnades. Imagine a group of eager minds following their master through gardens, as he pointed to plants, dissected animals, or asked riddles about the stars. But here's the mystery. The Lyceum wasn't just a school. It was the world's first research center. Aristotle ordered his students to gather knowledge from every corner of Greece. They brought plants, bones, maps, and strange reports of animals from foreign lands. Step by step, the Lyceum turned into a living encyclopedia. Whispers say that in its library, Aristotle kept hundreds of scrolls filled with secrets, descriptions of extinct animals, strange experiments, even lost works of science that later vanished in history's fire. Some scholars believe if those writings had survived, humanity's scientific revolution would have come 2,000 years earlier. The Lyceum wasn't just a school. It was Aristotle's gift to the world, a place where curiosity became power, and where knowledge began to march toward immortality. Centuries before microscopes, before laboratories, before Darwin, there was one man kneeling on the seashores of Greece, cutting open fish, observing insects, and writing down secrets of life. That man was Aristotle, now forever remembered as the father of biology. What makes this title fascinating is how early it came. In an age when people explained diseases with curses and gods, Aristotle dared to look closer. He opened animals, compared their organs, and wrote detailed notes. From the heart of an octopus to the wings of a bee, he wanted to understand why life works the way it does. But here's the suspense. Some of his observations were so precise, even modern scientists were shocked. For example, Aristotle described the reproductive habits of sharks with astonishing accuracy, knowledge that vanished after him and wasn't trusty. Rediscovered until the 19th century, he also recognized dolphins as mammals, not fish, a fact confirmed more than 2,000 years later. Yet, not all was perfect. He believed the brain was only a cooling device for the blood, while the heart was the true center of thought. Strange? Yes. But it shows how daring he was to guess when no tools existed. Picture this. Aristotle walking along the shore at dawn, scroll in hand, dissecting a cuttlefish while fishermen looked on in disbelief. To them, he was eccentric. To us, he was rewriting the language of life itself. Long before biology textbooks, long before DNA or microscopes, one man sat with ink-stained fingers, staring at creatures both tiny and massive. That man was Aristotle. And he attempted something no one had ever dared, to classify all living beings. But how could he do it without tools? He relied on his sharp eyes and sharper mind. He divided animals into two great categories, blooded and bloodless. Blooded creatures were those with red blood, like humans, fish, and mammals. Bloodless were the insects, crustaceans, and mollusks whose inner fluids weren't like ours. It was the first attempt at zoological classification in history. Here's the mystery. Though primitive, this system surprisingly worked for centuries. Even the great scientists of the Middle Ages followed his model, until modern taxonomy replaced it. But the unknown side is even more fascinating. Aristotle didn't just separate animals, He wrote over 500 species descriptions, some of which are now extinct. He described the electric ray, capable of stunning prey with invisible force. He recorded strange sea creatures that modern scholars debate may have been giant squids. Some even wonder, did Aristotle see things we have since lost to extinction? Imagine him walking through the markets of Athens, buying unusual animals, or traveling to the coastlines, watching octopuses change color before his eyes. While others saw food, Aristotle saw a coded mystery of nature, a puzzle he believed only the human mind could solve. While others hunted treasures of gold, Aristotle hunted treasures of thought. In a quiet corner of his Lyceum, with scrolls spread across wooden tables, he asked himself a daring question. How can the mind think without falling into chaos? From that question was born something humanity had never seen before, the first formal system of logic. Before Aristotle, people argued endlessly, throwing words like stones. He gave them structure. He showed that reasoning was not magic, but a machine of thought, one that could be built step by step. He invented the syllogism, if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. Sounds simple today, but 2,300 years ago it was groundbreaking. For the first time, truth had a method, not just opinion. But here's the twist. His logic wasn't just theory. It became a weapon. Politicians, philosophers, even lawyers would later wield Aristotelian logic to win debates, influence kings, and shape laws. For nearly 2,000 years, no one dared to challenge it. It was the unquestioned backbone of human reasoning. Some legends say that Aristotle's logic was so powerful, medieval scholars called it the organon, the instrument of all knowledge. Without it, science, law, and mathematics might never have advanced as they did. Picture Aristotle, drawing circles in the dust of the Lyceum's courtyard, his students leaning forward, realizing they were witnessing not just arguments, but the birth of reason itself. In the Lyceum's shaded walkways, Aristotle paused, looked at his students, and asked a riddle. If all men are mortal, and Socrates is a man, then what must Socrates be? The students hesitated, then answered, mortal. At that moment, Aristotle smiled. What looked like a simple puzzle was actually a revolution of the human mind. This was the syllogism, a chain of reasoning where truth flowed like logic's bloodstream. Why is this so powerful? Because for the first time, humans had a tool to test ideas. No longer would debates end in shouting matches or appeals to the gods. With syllogism, anyone could cut through lies and illusions using structure alone. It was almost like building a mathematical formula for truth. But here's the mystery. Aristotle believed this tool could unlock the universe itself. By stacking syllogisms, he thought one could climb from small truths to the greatest truth of all, the order of existence. Some say he hoped to find the very logic of God through these steps of reason. The power of syllogism was so immense that for centuries, medieval scholars used it to argue about heaven, hell, kings, and even science. In a sense, Aristotle had given humanity a sword sharper than any blade, the sword of reasoning. Imagine it, a philosopher, not a warrior, handing the world a weapon that would outlast empires. Aristotle's life was never quiet, yet somehow he left behind over 200 works, though only 31 survive. His writings stretch across politics, ethics, metaphysics, science, and even poetry. But these weren't dusty theories. They were manuals for life itself. In his Politics, he called man a political animal. He believed humans weren't meant to live alone. We were designed to form societies, to debate, to govern, to clash and compromise. Centuries later, democracies and republics would still lean on his insights. In Nicomachean Ethics, written in memory of his son, Aristotle explored the deepest question: how should we live? His answer wasn't wealth or glory, but the pursuit of virtue, balance, discipline, and the mysterious golden mean. To him, a brave man was not reckless nor cowardly, but balanced between the two. Then came his metaphysics, where Aristotle stared into the heart of existence itself. Being, cause, purpose, words most ignored, but to him they were the code of the universe. Here he introduced the famous unmoved mover, a mysterious eternal force that sets everything into motion, but is itself untouched. For some, this was the closest philosophy had come to describing God. The tragedy? Much of his writing is lost, burned in wars, stolen in conquests, or simply vanished, simply. Scholars whisper, if all his scrolls had survived, our world today might be 1,000 years ahead in wisdom. Aristotle believed that the universe itself was written in balance. Not too much, not too little, but just enough. And from this vision came one of his greatest ideas, the golden mean. To him, every virtue was a middle path between two extremes. Courage, for example, sat between cowardice and recklessness. Generosity lived between stinginess and wastefulness. Even truth had a balance, honesty without cruelty. Life, Aristotle whispered, was not about chasing extremes, but about mastering harmony. But here's the suspense. This wasn't dry philosophy. Aristotle lived by it. In the noisy courts of kings, where greed and ambition destroyed men, he quietly practiced moderation. He dined simply, avoided luxury, and walked daily with students in the Lyceum gardens. To him, the golden mean wasn't just ethics, it was survival in a chaotic world. What makes it more fascinating is how timeless it feels. Today, psychologists talk of balance for mental health, leaders preach moderation, and doctors speak of homeostasis in the body. All of this echoes Aristotle's ancient wisdom. Some legends even say that when Alexander grew too ambitious, Aristotle warned him of the dangers of excess. The world, he hinted, cannot be conquered without first conquering oneself. But Alexander never listened, and his empire crumbled. Aristotle's golden mean remains like a hidden compass, a reminder that the secret of greatness may lie not in extremes, but in the quiet middle path no one notices. Aristotle didn't just look at the world, he looked at what it could become. To him, everything in existence carried two faces: potentiality, what it could be, and actuality, what it is. He explained it with simple yet powerful images. An acorn is not just a seed, it is a potential oak tree waiting to happen. A child is not just small and weak. He holds within him the potential of a wise man or a hero. The universe, Aristotle believed, was filled with hidden possibilities, constantly struggling to become real. But here's the mystery. He thought this process wasn't random. Every being carried within itself a secret purpose, a built-in design trying to reach fulfillment. The sculptor does not create the statue. He simply removes the stone around it to reveal what was always hidden inside. For Aristotle, this was more than philosophy. It was destiny. He applied it to everything, from animals growing into adults, to cities rising into civilizations, even to the human soul reaching toward virtue. He saw the whole cosmos as a grand journey from potential to actual, from seed to bloom, from dream to reality. Some scholars whisper that this was his most spiritual thought, a way of seeing divine fingerprints in nature. For if every potential seeks its actual, then perhaps humanity itself is still unfolding into something greater, something yet unseen. In a world where many philosophers stared at the sky and only guessed, Aristotle did something radical. He looked closer. He believed truth wasn't hidden in imagination alone, but in empirical observation, seeing, touching, dissecting, recording. Knowledge to him had to be carved out of nature itself. Picture Aristotle at dawn, walking through Athens with students carrying jars, nets, and scrolls. They weren't going to a temple. They were going to rivers, forests, and markets, collecting plants, insects, fish, and strange bones. Every feather, every shell, every claw was carefully observed, noted, and compared. Here's the mystery. Some say Aristotle personally examined over 500 animal species, making him the first true biologist. He described the beating heart of an embryo chick, the camouflaging octopus, and even the migration of eels. Though some puzzles, like where eels actually reproduce, remained unsolved mysteries for centuries. What set him apart was his daring idea. Trust your eyes, but train them. While others relied on myths, Aristotle demanded evidence. Even when he was wrong, like thinking flies had 4 legs instead of 6, his method of questioning through observation laid the foundation for science itself. Imagine the whispers of fishermen watching him dissect a dolphin, or traders watching him sketch exotic birds. To them, it looked like curiosity. To us, it was the birth of the scientific method. The courage to say, "Don huiti just believe." Look, if you had followed Aristotle on his journeys, you wouldn't find him only in libraries or palaces. You would often see him kneeling by the sea. Hands, wet eyes, sharp, studying creatures that slipped between waves and shadows. To him, the oceans were a living laboratory. He examined octopuses, squids, crabs, fish, dolphins, and countless shells. His curiosity was endless. One fisherman later recalled how Aristotle bought strange catches from the market just to cut them open. Imagine the scene. A philosopher with scrolls beside him, carefully dissecting a cuttlefish, while the crowd watched in shock. Here's the astonishing part. Many of his descriptions were so accurate that modern marine biologists were stunned when they read them centuries later. He noted how an octopus changes color to hide, how certain fish protect their eggs, and how dolphins breathe air just like humans. He even discovered that sharks give birth to live young, a fact forgotten after him and rediscovered only in the 1800s. But the mystery lies in what he might have seen that we no longer can. He described massive sea creatures and rare behaviors that modern science struggles to verify. Were these exaggerations, or did Aristotle witness animals that are now extinct? What is certain is this. By studying marine life and anatomy, Aristotle became the first great zoologist, proving that the ocean was not chaos, but order, a mirror of life's hidden rules. Aristotle looked up at the night sky and saw mystery written in fire. Stars moved, the sun rose and set, the moon changed shape. Yet to him, one thing was certain. Earth was the center of it all. In his model, Earth sat unmoving at the heart of the universe, while the sun, moon, planets, and stars circled around it in perfect eternal spheres. To Aristotle, the heavens were flawless, unchanging, divine. The earth below was heavy, imperfect, and mortal, but above? The cosmos was eternal perfection. This belief, called geocentrism, ruled human thought for nearly 2,000 years. Every scholar, priest, and king accepted it as truth because Aristotle's voice carried more weight than doubt itself. The suspense? Even when future astronomers like Copernicus and Galileo challenged it, people clung to Aristotle's vision so tightly that Galileo was put on trial for daring to break it. But here's the unknown twist. Aristotle wasn't a blind dreamer. His model was based on what he could see with the naked eye. Without telescopes, the stars truly did look like they circled Earth. To him, it wasn't arrogance, it was observation. Imagine him, standing on a hill under a velvet Greek sky, pointing at the heavens with a stick, tracing invisible circles in the air for his students. To Aristotle, Earth was the stage, and the stars were the eternal audience. And for centuries, humanity believed the same. For Aristotle, knowledge wasn't a pile of scattered scrolls. It was a kingdom, and every part had its own place. He believed wisdom had to be classified, just like animals or stars. So, he divided knowledge into 3 great branches. 1. Theoretical sciences, knowledge for truth's sake. This was philosophy, mathematics, and physics, the quest to understand what is. To Aristotle, this was the highest form of knowledge because truth itself was divine. 2. Practical sciences, knowledge for living, ethics, politics, and the art of decision-making. These were not about abstract truths, but about guiding humans to live wisely, justly, and in harmony. 3. Productive sciences, knowledge for creating. This was about making things, art, poetry, medicine, architecture. To Aristotle, even the work of a craftsman shaping wood carried wisdom, for it turned ideas into reality. But here's the mystery. Aristotle didn't stop at theory. He taught that a philosopher must be all 3 at once, a thinker, a doer, and a creator. Knowledge that lived only in books was dead. True knowledge had to walk, speak, and build. Imagine him pacing in the Lyceum, telling his students, The one who knows but does not act is like a man who owns a sword yet never draws it. To Aristotle, the power of knowledge wasn't only in the mind. It was in shaping life itself. Aristotle's mind was a storm that never rested. From dawn till dusk, he wrote. On scrolls, on wax tablets, on scraps of parchment. His students described him as a man who seemed to breathe ink. By the end of his life, he had written over 200 works covering everything from logic and biology to dreams, poetry, music, and even the movement of the stars. But here's the tragedy. Today, only about 31 works survive. The rest, nearly 85% of his genius, vanished into the black hole of history. Wars, fires, and neglect swallowed them. Some were burned in the library of Alexandria. Others were hidden in damp cellars until mold ate them, and some simply disappeared, leaving behind whispers of what they might have contained. The mystery deepens when you realize that ancient writers hinted at Aristotle. Essen, lost books, texts on comedy, on the secret powers of music, even on strange sciences no one had ever seen again. What secrets did those scrolls hold? Some scholars believe if they had survived, the scientific revolution might have begun 1,000 years earlier. Imagine it. Locked in those lost scrolls could have been cures, inventions, or knowledge we still struggle to find. When we read Aristotle today, we are not reading the full man, only fragments of his giant mind. The rest lies buried in time, a treasure history never returned. Aristotle may have died in 322 BC, but his voice never went silent. Centuries later, when Europe fell into the so-called Dark Ages, much of Greek knowledge vanished. Yet, somewhere far away, in the bustling cities of the Islamic world, Baghdad, Damascus, Cordoba, Aristotle's works were being translated, studied, and expanded. Great Islamic scholars like Avicenna, Ibn Sina, and Averroes, Ibn Rushd, read Aristotle not as history, but as a living guide. They called him the first teacher. His logic shaped Islamic law, his metaphysics fueled debates about God and the soul, and his science inspired medicine and astronomy. Without Aristotle, the golden age of Islam might never have burned so brightly. The suspense? When these Arabic translations reached Europe centuries later, they relit a fire in the West. Christian philosophers like Thomas Aquinas embraced Aristotle's reasoning, weaving it with theology. Aquinas even referred to him simply as the philosopher, as if no other name was needed. Through Aquinas, Aristotle's thought became the backbone of medieval Christian philosophy and education. But here's the mysterious twist. Aristotle's ideas sometimes clashed with religious teachings. Was the earth eternal or created? Did the soul die or live forever? These debates shook universities, split churches, and shaped entire civilizations. Imagine it. A man from ancient Greece, long dead, whispering through the pens of Islamic scholars, echoing in the sermons of Christian monks, guiding kings and priests alike. His words traveled like shadows, unseen but powerful, shaping worlds that never knew his face. Aristotle once observed something chillingly true. Man is by nature a political animal. But what did he mean? To him, humans were never meant to live in isolation. Unlike beasts of the forest, humans spoke, reasoned, and built societies. He believed the city, the polis, was humanity's natural home. A man outside society, Aristotle said, was either a beast or a god, but never fully human. This wasn't just theory. Aristotle had lived it. He saw firsthand how politics could shape destiny. He had tutored Alexander the Great, a man who would unite nations by force. He himself lived under suspicion, accused of impiety when Athens turned politically hostile. He even fled the city near the end of his life, whispering bitterly that he wouldn't let Athens sin against philosophy twice, a haunting reference to the execution of Socrates. The mystery lies in how prophetic his words became. Even today, humans cannot escape politics. From the smallest village council to global powers, we still act like political animals, forever drawn into struggles of power, laws, and leadership. Aristotle seemed to predict our future, warning that the urge to form societies and rule each other would never die. It is as if he held up a mirror to mankind's soul. showing that no matter how advanced we become, our destiny is always tied to politics. A truth as dangerous today as it was in his time. When Aristotle returned to Athens, he didn't simply teach. He built a world of knowledge. Around 335 BC, he founded the Lyceum, a school that was unlike anything the world had seen before. Unlike Plato's academy, which focused mainly on philosophy, Aristotle's Lyceum became a living library. He gathered scrolls from across the known world, creating one of the first true libraries in history. His students were not just passive listeners, they were explorers, collecting plants, dissecting animals, observing stars, and recording everything. Aristotle turned learning into investigation. But here's where the mystery deepens. Aristotle and his students often walked while they discussed, earning the name Peripatetics, the walking philosophers. Some say this restless motion symbolized the way knowledge itself must always move, never still. The Lyceum's impact stretched far beyond its stone walls. For nearly 200 years after his death, his successors kept teaching there. And even when the building fell, the spirit of the Lyceum lived on. Medieval universities unknowingly copied its model. Lectures, libraries, and systematic research. Imagine it! Every modern classroom, every university hall, every library today carries a shadow of Aristotle's Lyceum. But perhaps the most haunting thought is this. Much of what was written, discovered, and stored in that great library of the Lyceum is now lost to time, just like Aristotle's missing works. A silent reminder that even the greatest schools can be swallowed by history. Aristotle's last years were not spent in peace. After Alexander the Great died in 323 BC, Athens turned restless. The city that once welcomed Aristotle now looked at him with suspicion. Enemies accused him of impiety, the same charge that condemned Socrates to death. But Aristotle would not allow Athens to stain its hands again. With quiet bitterness, he fled, declaring, "I will not let the Athenians sin against philosophy twice." He escaped to the island of Euboea, carrying with him the weight of a lifetime of knowledge, yet also a sense of betrayal. There, in the quiet town of Chalcis, his health began to fail. Some say it was a stomach illness. Others whisper it may have been poison from political enemies who feared his influence. History never gave us a clear answer. He died in 322 BC at the age of 62, leaving behind not just unfinished manuscripts, but an unanswered riddle. How does a man who taught Alexander, who shaped the mind of civilizations, vanish so quietly from the world stage? Even in death, Aristotle left a mystery. His tomb was said to have been honored by future generations, but the exact site remains uncertain, lost beneath centuries of earth. Some fragments suggest it stood near his birthplace in Stagira, a final return home. And so, the father of biology, the philosopher of all philosophers, ended his journey not in glory, but in silence, a silence that still speaks louder than words. And so this was the journey of Aristotle, a man who began as the curious son of a physician, became the teacher of kings, and left behind a legacy that still shapes science, philosophy, and even our daily lives. His story reminds us that true greatness is not measured by power or wealth, but by the ideas that survive long after we are gone. This was the third episode of our series, Who Was He? And trust me, the mysteries of history have only just begun. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Because here, we bring you more untold stories, hidden truths, and forgotten legends that will keep you hooked till the very end.